Live at the conclusion of another Ohio State win. This one took a second half surge by the Buckeyes, which propelled them to beat the Hawkeyes on Saturday afternoon on CBS. The final score of this one, 35-7.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Buckeye fans, to my kind of postcast here on Locked On Buckeyes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. And this podcast is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200,000 bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Ohio State just concluded their fifth game of the season. It was a 35-7 win over a tough, physical Iowa Hawkeyes team. Anytime you play a Kirk Ferentz-led Iowa team, you know it's going to be physical. Ryan Day in the postgame presser on the field with Jenny Dell, he said, you're basically doing inside drill for 60 minutes. And that's what it was. In the first half, the Buckeyes didn't finish drives. They had some turnovers, one by Smith, one by Howard. But in the second half, it was a second half surge which propelled Ohio State to pummel Iowa. And when I mean pummel Iowa, Iowa had absolutely no chance in the second half of doing anything in this game. Iowa's offense is simple. Caleb Johnson a bust. And clearly, by the numbers in the first half, he didn't get anything going at all. In this game, well under his average per game, which is at 170 rushing yards a game, he only had 15 carries for 86 yards. He did score Iowa's lone touchdown, but that was when the game was way out of reach. Cade McNamara, the former Michigan quarterback, what did he do? He tried to do some things that were successful. He tried to figure some things out, but ultimately he couldn't. He was not a guy. He was not good enough today to beat Ohio State like he did for the Wolverines back in 2021, because Ohio State in the second half surge, as I was watching the game and trying to track down the drive chart in the second half, it was different than the first. You had a Jeremiah Smith fumble in the first half that killed a drive. You had a turnover by Will Howard, a really bad throw by Will Howard. You had other things, that a turnover on downs. The Buckeyes didn't convert on 4th and 2. We'll talk about that later in this show. But what you did have in the second half, Buckeyes got the ball first. Jeremiah Smith scored. Next time, right after that, Iowa got the ball. Jack Sawyer calls the fumble. Cody Simon recovered it. Very next drive, Will Howard runs it in for a touchdown. The very next drive, Egbuka interception. The very next drive, Will Howard to Egbuka. The very next drive, Ty Hamilton forced fumble, recovered by Kenyatta Jackson Jr. The very next drive, Will Howard to Emeka Egbuka. And so in the second half surge, the feel of the second half was a lot different than the first, but that was what needed to happen. For Ohio State to continue to get better, yes, they're going to come out of the locker room and just pummel the opponent, but they got to start games better too. I am very happy and very excited Ohio State won the game, and I'm very pleased with a lot of the things we saw today, and I'm very happy with the second half surge. Trust me, that needed to happen, and what we saw was when Ohio State wanted to put their foot on Iowa's neck, that's exactly what happened. The defense turned up the intensity, got a little bit more physical. The D-line got a lot more pressure. Iowa had no answer. When you slow down Iowa's run game, you turn to Cade McNamara, who's not a good quarterback. He's not even really a solid quarterback. His numbers today are pedestrian. 14-20, 98 yards, 1 interception. Yeah, his completion percentage is 70, but when you watch the game, it looked like it was worse than that because the guy was just not getting the job done. But that's what you expect from Ohio State's defense. One of the best in the country. You could throw all the numbers out there and try to compare stats versus this school or that school. What do your eyeballs tell you? My eyeballs tell me in the second half, Ohio State's great. In the first half, though, there were some soft coverage by the DBs. There were some plays where Iowa was able to get Ohio State over the middle and get some underneath throws. They threw one, I believe, on third or fourth down, I believe, to convert and to move the chains. The first half stuff by the secondary is still very confusing because we all know how good Ohio State secondary is, or we think we know how good Ohio State secondary is. We believe that it's better than what we have seen over the past couple of weeks. But what if this is the norm? The first half, Ohio State gives up a little bit. Even against Marshall, it's 3 weeks in a row where Ohio State secondary is giving up a little bit. There's a few issues there. But ultimately, what do we find? Second half, it's a different story. Now, just imagine if what we saw today in the second half where Ohio State just pummeled Iowa, if that was 4 quarters of that, well, that's what you need next week against Oregon. Ohio State could have used this as a look-ahead game and said, oh, Oregon's next week. Oregon is that school that they're better than Iowa. They have more talent than Iowa. Let's go ahead and look over the Hawkeyes to pursue Oregon next week. We would be on this show after the Oregon game saying, well, they used that Iowa game as a look-ahead game. Or today, even on this show, we could say, well, Ohio State was looking ahead to Oregon. No, that wasn't the case. If Jeremiah Smith doesn't fumble, if Will Howard doesn't throw the interception, there's a good chance there are points on both of those drives, at least field goals, 6 points. If everything else stays the same, Ohio State scores 40-plus points once again, and that would be 5 straight games where they're doing that, which is what you expect from this offense because we all know how elite it can be when everything is hitting the way that it needs to hit. What we got in the second half, really all game from Egbuka. He was just out of his mind playing phenomenal. What we got from Jack Sawyer and a lot of the other guys on the D-line was turned up the intensity. They were in Cade McNamara's face. He was not comfortable in the pocket the deeper we got into the game. What we got from the running backs, and can I just pause real quick for the offensive line? They're people movers. They're the kind of people movers that don't get a lot of attention. They don't get a lot of publicity. But what do? They're simply doing their job. And one thing we saw today from the people movers, they're moving people all game long. And Iowa's front seven, one of the best in the country every year. One of the most physical, one of the most disciplined every single year. And for the most part, there were a few hiccups every now and then. Simmons missed a block when he was out in space. Josh Fryer a little bit. Just a couple of the guys on the outside where you see it a little bit more than others. But outside of that, buddy, they are moving people consistently. And when they start moving at this rate and moving people consistently, you're going to get that second half surge from the run game. You're going to get more better plays from Will Howard. You're going to get better plays all around because the people movers up front are moving people. All 5 guys in the offensive line. I got to clap it up for you. Don't know me do this on the postcast here. But trust me, they were simply doing their job. Who else is doing their job was on the defensive side of the ball. Sonny Styles, phenomenal play today. Led the Buckeyes in tackles with 7. He also added in 2 tackles for loss. Cody Simon had 6 tackles. He added in 1 pass breakup as well. Igman had that INT. Ty Hamilton, phenomenal. 3rd most tackles on the day. He also had a sack. He also had a forced fumble. I mean, the defense all across the board, everybody on the field was just rising to the occasion. And it definitely helps you rise to the occasion when the opposing running back who's from the state of Ohio makes a statement about not committing to Ohio State, even if they offered him when he was in high school. Yeah, that's fuel for the fire. And Jack Sawyer and others said, oh, yeah, that's going to pump us up. It's going to add a little oomph to our step. And what did we find? The Buckeyes used that fuel all game long to the tune of Caleb Johnson not getting anything done. Outside of that touchdown, when it was basically mop-up duty, he ain't getting nothing done. That's hats off to Jack Sawyer. That's hats off to the defense. That's hats off to everybody out there that took that personal because they needed to. If somebody is from the state that your school is in and they say, oh, if that school offered me, I wouldn't have gone there and it's one of the big boys like Ohio State, you better take that personal. And I am personally glad that's exactly how they took it. I'm also personally glad that the Buckeyes run game got a lot more traction in the second half. And as Gary Danielson said, smash and dash, that's what he called the Buckeyes 2 running backs. They were getting the job done. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Y'all, that's so good, I gotta say it again. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. All the action goes down on the FanDuel Sportsbook app and also at FanDuel.com. Thank you all for tuning into this postcast after Ohio State's 35-7 win over the Iowa Hawkeyes, a very good physical Iowa Hawkeyes team that going into this game, their rush defense was one of the best in the country, gave up about 61 rushing yards a game, 2.4 yards a pop, or what they were giving up to the opposition. In today's game, Ohio State in back-to-back weeks, they saw the film. They saw how good the opposing team's defense was, especially with the rush defense. And what did they say? We see what you average give up in games. Well, how about we take advantage of what you do so well and just make sure that's your weakness in this game? That's exactly what happened. Ohio State in this game on the ground, they were getting the job done. 40 rushes, 203 rushing yards, had one touchdown. That was a touchdown by Will Howard. And at halftime, I was trying to figure out what's the formula. What does Ohio State need to do to kind of get the ball rolling, get more success on offense? And it was simple. Run the ball. I believe at halftime, Ohio State was averaging 7.4 yards per carry, which is insane, absolutely insane. And then you look at the numbers at the end of the day. Judkins had 13 for 78. Henderson had 11 for 61. Howard had 10 for 28. Keep in mind that 6 yards a carry and 5.5 yards a carry for Judkins and Henderson, respectively. Those two guys smash and dash, you're consistently getting the job done. It doesn't matter what team is out there or how good the opposition is, they're getting the job done. Now, my one wish for Ohio State's run game right now is that Judkins starts to emerge and slowly gets more carries than Henderson. Now, I'm not meaning like a gap of 2 or a gap of 3. No. I mean, they're getting, hey, Henderson gets 10, Judkins gets 15 or 16 rushes. I think the gap between how good they are as running backs is it's pretty clear that Judkins is the better all-around back. That's not saying Henderson's not a really good guy. It's not great for college football, because that's exactly what he is. However, I personally believe Judkins is the better all-around back, and when you watch the game, especially today, knowing that Iowa's physical and knowing that Judkins is the better guy against this opponent, he's out here running over guys like it's his job. Like he gets a bonus based off how hard he runs over somebody. Or let's backtrack that. You run over somebody, you get some money. You run over them so hard, you get some more money. Stiff arm that dude, here's some more money. You hurdle this guy that's not really in his game, not in his bag, but if he does it, you get some more money. Why? Because, buddy, that's just what you do. So when it comes to Judkins and Henderson, my biggest takeaway from these guys today, keep running the ball. Establish the run early. Because if you go back to the first half, when they weren't running the ball as much and having the success on the ground like they should have, it didn't help Will Howard. It didn't really help anything in the pass game. Yeah, Emeka Egbuka ended the day with 3 touchdowns, which that was a fun thing to watch. But I even think Will Howard, some of his throws that were a little bit tougher, where he made some boneheaded decisions, those may not have been boneheaded decisions if the Buckeyes started to establish the run. After the game, I think it was after the game, I forget who even said it. It was Gary Danielson or somebody else discussing with Chip Kelly with his offense. Once you start to establish the run, it opens up so much for the quarterback and makes his job so much easier. In Chip Kelly's offense, well, I want to go a step further. It makes any quarterback's job when the run is established early. Because if you establish the run early, the defense has to say, we planned on focusing on this guy being a running back, and we have to. But then you have to worry about the 2 guys on the outside, maybe a tight end or a guy in the slot, and it makes their focus so much harder to focus on the main guy, because now you have to focus on 4 or 5 other players. Yes, I understand what Gary Danielson was saying in regards to, well, if you establish the run, it makes it more easier for Chip Kelly quarterbacks. That's true, but it makes any quarterback's job better. Talk to the greats. I mean, the Hall of Famers, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Roger Staubach, any of these great quarterbacks throughout the history of the National Football League. Or if you want to go back to college, Matt Leinart, J.T. Barrett, Cardell Jones, Justin Fields, C.J. Stroud, Kyle McCord. Talk to any of the Buckeye greats, any of the greats in the NFL. What will they tell you? If we establish the run, it instantly makes my job easier because now it opens up things in the passing game, or maybe the run's going so well, we're going to continue to run this thing. It makes my job so much easier, my offensive coordinator's job so much easier once the run is established. And in the second half, once we realized that Ohio State's plan was to establish the run and to do it really, really quickly, what did you find? Iowa couldn't stop Ohio State's offense. And in the grand scheme of things, Ohio State should have scored over 40 points today. And that's not me just being an Ohio State guy or being a homer. That's realistic. We have been on this show throughout the weeks talking about how Ohio State, sometimes their self-inflicted wounds are the only things that can stop their offense. And as great as Iowa's defense is, once Ohio State established the run, Iowa had no answer. And it wasn't the Jeremiah Smith show today, even though he did have a phenomenal game at one catch for 23 yards in the first half. For the game, he had 4 catches, 89 yards, and 1 touchdown. And that touchdown, let me just tell you, man, we marvel at what Jeremiah Smith did against Michigan State, those 2 one-handed catches at the end of the first half. The one-handed catch he had today for that touchdown was just as good, or if not better, because homie was holding his left arm. And Jeremiah Smith went up, he caught that ball, and then as they do down there in South Florida, took his left hand to the defender's shoulder pads, his chest, and pushed him off of him and said, "Get off me." And I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, I like that. Do that again. He is showing everybody he's not just a freshman. I know what he is in school. He is playing like a seasoned vet. And at the end of the season, it wouldn't shock me if the narrative around college football is that Jeremiah Smith is the best wide receiver in college football. It wouldn't shock me at all because he very well might be that guy at the end of the day. I understand there's Ryan Williams down there at Alabama. I understand there's Luther Burden III at Missouri. I understand there's a lot of great receivers in college football. Jeremiah Smith is different, man. He's absolutely different. When the blocking downfield, he has made some mistakes. There was a time, it wasn't a first down, but he caught a ball on the right sideline and realized there's 2 guys here. I need to get as close to the first down marker as I can. And he paused, spun towards the out of bounds line, which was away from the 2 defenders. He eluded them quickly, got out of bounds. I believe it was a 4th and 2. And what do you find? He is quickly realizing sometimes I got to spin outside and get out of bounds instead of trying to get the extra yard and stay in bounds. Sometimes on the end around that he had, I got to run and get out of bounds quickly. I know I can get extra yards, but save my body. One of my favorite things that I learned and witnessed from Marvin Harrison Sr. when he was on the Colts and Reggie Wayne, them 2 together, they found ways to save their bodies because they realized, especially when they play football, you go over the middle, or if you were just out there in the middle of the field, you're free game if you're about to catch that ball. So if you quickly get down, you live to fight another day, and the offense continues to keep the ball in and move the ball down the field. Jeremiah Smith is learning quickly on the job what it means to not only be an elite receiver, but to be one of the best receivers in the country, knowing that everybody's going to throw their best at you, and your best, from what we have seen, most of the time is not better than Jeremiah Smith's best. Holding him, face mask, holding his arm down. Y'all, it don't matter. Jeremiah Smith is just that good. And he's showing everybody he's not just the best receiver on Ohio State's team. He's not just the best receiver in the Big Ten. He's one of the best receivers in the entire country. I'll say it today. I'll say it tomorrow. I'll say it all season long because it's the truth. What also is the truth is that there are 2 guys that played so well. They're the Locked On Buckeyes players of the game for Ohio State's 35-7 win over Iowa. We'll dive into those two players next. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals. I like that part on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. One of the best things about Game Time is it makes your ticket purchasing process easy. They provide the panoramic view from your seat. They got that lowest price guarantee. They got that all-in pricing, and they also got the Game Time ticket coverage as well. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Thank you for tuning in to this Locked On Buckeyes postcast after Ohio State's 35-7 win over the Iowa Hawkeyes. This game was fun. There was a second half surge by Ohio State, which was definitely needed for the Buckeyes to win that game. There was also smash and dash, a perfect combination of Quinshon, Judkins, and TreVeyon Henderson to this game where they were just getting the job done on the ground. But throughout all of the players that played well, Tumalua played well. Ty Hamilton got it in the mix, had a forced fumble in this game, knowing he was hungry to get payback against Cade McNamara, the former Wolverines quarterback. There was also Jeremiah Smith who scored. Will Howard had some issues in the first half, but played phenomenal ball most of the game. But outside of all of that, there were just two guys that played so well. They get the tag of being players of the game via Locked On Buckeyes for this win. And let's go defense first. Don't normally do that, but we got to today. Jack Sawyer is a defensive player of the game. 3 tackles, 1.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble. And Jack Sawyer, those of you watching right now, see him pursuing Cade McNamara. This picture just greatly describes exactly what Jack Sawyer did in this game today. Pursued. He pushed. He was hungry. Every time he had it, he took the opportunity to put his hands on Cade McNamara, push him a little bit, get a little physical. Even if he knew if he went a half step too far, it would have been roughing the passer or even a late hit, one of the two. He said, oh, no, I'm going to push you. I'm going to get my hands on you, make sure you feel me. That's a psychological thing. On top of it being a physical thing, it's a psychological thing. And with him being an in-state kid, I understand, and I said it earlier, that he took that Caleb Johnson thing a little personal, and I'm not mad at him for it, because I would too. If somebody is on the opposition from the state that I'm from the state that the school that I go to is from, and all of a sudden they're saying if they got an offer from the school, they wouldn't have gone there, I'd be literally a little pissed off. Absolutely, 100%. I would be a little annoyed by that. And I think Jack Sawyer was, but he realized, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. I'm not going to worry about and rely on exactly the things that he is saying right now and saying, oh, he going to say that and I ain't going to do nothing about it. I'm going to be about that action, boss, and I'm going to do something about it. That's exactly what Jack Sawyer did. He got physical with Cade McNamara. He was talking trash with Caleb Johnson. He made sure that his presence was felt, not just heard, but it was felt. And it was in the tune of Iowa really not being able to do anything offensively. It also energized the other Buckeyes on the defense to be a little bit more physical, to go the extra mile, to do some things they don't normally do, and it worked so well. Sonny Styles, man, I was back and forth between who it should be. Sonny Styles played great ball today, led the Buckeyes in tackles, and after last week when we talked about how Michigan State tried to use him because he was a weak link there at linebacker, what did you find today? He stepped his game up. He followed the game plan, played better than we expected. Hats off to Sonny Styles as well. But then offensively, had a career high with receiving touchdowns today. It's Emeka Egbuka. 9 catches, 71 yards, 3 touchdowns. Emeka Egbuka was that dude. And as you see right now, these pictures are great for describing how these guys are playing the ball today. The ball is in his hands, and what is he doing? One, he's leaning, not backwards, but he's leaning forward. And Emeka Egbuka, with all the hype around Jeremiah Smith, I think Emeka Egbuka kind of gets lost in the sauce and doesn't get all the attention that he deserves. Similar to Lathan Ransom on defense, everyone's shining the light on Caleb Downs, and Lathan Ransom's been here for a long time. Let's not forget how great he is. And Emeka Egbuka reminded everybody once again today that he is really good at playing wide receiver. Intermediate routes, deep routes, contested routes, does not matter. Where the ball needs to be put where only he can catch it. Will Howard put the ball in the money, and Emeka Egbuka made the play. Had a career high receiving touchdowns today, and Iowa had no answer. We go in every single week saying Jeremiah Smith's going to do this, Jeremiah Smith's going to do that. Maybe we should add into it Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith will do this in this game, because if you keep focusing on Jeremiah Smith, that just is going to make these lanes and these windows for balls coming to Emeka Egbuka a whole lot bigger. Emeka Egbuka, congratulations. I've been enjoying watching him play all year long throughout his entire Buckeye career. And this is just one of those games where he's reminding everybody he has a really good shot to be a first-round pick in the spring of the upcoming NFL draft because he can do it all. Now, the Buckeyes really have not used him in the backfield as far as motioning back and forth, doing the end around and reverse stuff, or maybe even try to line him up in the backfield to do a little trickeration. They haven't really done that. And so if they tried that next week against Oregon or maybe down the road against Penn State, it wouldn't shock me because imagine you have Judkins and Egbuka in the backfield. Or let's go a step further. You got a split backfield with Will Howard under center, and you have Judkins. You got Henderson in the split back in the old school three-point stance in the backfield. And then you got Egbuka motioning in the backfield as well to form a diamond formation. Think about how crazy that's going to be for opposing defensive coordinators. And that's not something I normally think about when it comes to Ohio State's offense. But when you have these kinds of weapons, you got to think outside of the box. And one of the ways to think outside of the box is you got a split backfield, the two top running backs at Ohio State. And then all of a sudden you motion Egbuka back in the backfield in the diamond formation with one point being Egbuka, the other point being Will Howard. I mean, the possibilities are endless. It's going to make it so easy for Chip Kelly to just dial the right thing up. It's also going to make it easy for Chip Kelly to dial the right thing up once the Buckeyes consistently establish the run. Because I got to revisit this once again before we close up shop. If the Buckeyes establish the run in the first half, they score 45-plus points easily. I mean, you're looking at 2 more touchdowns. You're looking at, 49 points over the 35 they have right now. Could have easily been 50 because you're looking at a fumble, an interception, and a fourth down stop. Now, I got to also revisit this really quickly. Buckeyes failed to convert on 4th and 2 early in the game. And in the moment, I even tweeted out that 4th and 2 calling a QB blast out of shotgun made me scratch my head. It would have been a whole lot better to give the ball to Judkins or Henderson because those two guys with the Buckeyes offensive line can get that 2 yards. I think it's a learning situation. Even though Howard was a half yard away from crossing the offensive line, the first down marker, I think it's a learning situation. Yeah, you're a half yard away. You could have been 2 yards beyond the line of scrimmage with how well the O-line was playing at the time if you just call a different play, a slight tweak. That play it was a head scratcher. I wouldn't have been scratching my head by the play call if you give the ball to one of your running backs because those guys are made for that. This is their job. Their job is to run the ball, tote the rock, and to scoot that thing down the field. So for Chip Kelly, not only is it try to establish a run earlier in the game, it's also situational play calling. Yes, Will Howard had some success running the ball at that point in time. But in that situation, on that play, I'm not giving the ball to Will Howard. He ain't JT Barrett. I know people keep trying to compare the two. He is not JT Barrett. He's not. But you got Judkins. You got Henderson. You got future pros in the backfield. And give the ball to them. Let 18 get the ball to number 1 or number 32, and let them be the guys that get those tough yards to move the chains and to continue to move the ball down the field. Thank you all for tuning in to this Locked on Buckeyes postcast for your second listen on this College Football Saturday. make sure you find Locked On College Football. Spencer McLaughlin not only keeps you up to date with all the NIL deals and conference realignment rumors, but he also is the guy that's going to recap everything going on this phenomenal college football Saturday. You can find Locked On College Football on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. Send every email to jstevens317@gmail.com. Buckeye fans, what's the best thing about being 5-0? The chance to go 6-0, and that's only possible because Ohio State pummeled Iowa with a second half surge. The Buckeyes beat the Hawkeyes 35-7.